The college football season is nearly upon us. Media days are finished, which means week one is just around the corner. We're here to talk about that and more. Welcome into this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered, our podcast from the USA Today Network. I'm Blake Toppmeyer alongside John Adams. We're going to play a round of fact or fiction today as I throw a few scenarios that may or may not play out this season in the SEC. John will help us separate fact from fiction. Also going to start here with a look at some week one games. Welcome in, John. Media days are all finished. Wondered if, before we move on, last week was media days for the ACC and the Big Ten. And Big Ten was kind of making some waves there. Tony Petitti doubling down on his playoff plan that seems to be going nowhere fast. Curt Cignetti throwing elbows at the SEC. Any takeaways from what you observed from afar at Big Ten Media Days in Las Vegas?
Yeah, it's funny how the Big Ten and SEC have this two conference coalition held together by nothing but pure greed, because it really comes through that they don't really like each other that much. They don't really want to. If it's a family, it's a very dysfunctional one. I still think you may disagree, but I still think the SEC has the upper hand in this just because of its history. And you can talk about these two teams are equal. These two conferences are equal in that they're above all the others, but it just doesn't look that way when I go down and look at each team in the league. Even though I give the Big Ten all the credit for winning back-to-back national titles, but that alone doesn't distinguish who's the stronger conference. I just think, as the SEC says, it just means more. The Big Ten didn't come up with that slogan, did it? No.
Well, I think the SEC has the upper hand from the added perspective of some of the things the Big Ten wants, it can't get. It doesn't have the power to get. Like the Big Ten wants the SEC to play a ninth conference game. Okay, so do you and I. We'd love to see the SEC get rid of one of its cupcakes and play another conference game. But the Big Ten doesn't have the power to control the SEC's conference schedule. It may have won the last two national championships. It did do that. Got more teams in the playoff last year in the SEC, but that doesn't suddenly give it the power to control the SEC schedule. The Big Ten wants this auto bid playoff plan, but it has no allies in wanting that plan. The SEC has peeled off into another direction, did that several months ago, and has not retreated back to the Big Ten's auto bid plan. And actually, the SEC now is aligned with the Big 12 and the ACC behind their playoff plan, the 5+11 plan that we've talked about so much. I don't know how much that alliance matters, but I think it does matter that the Big Ten has zero allies in its playoff plan. And you hit the nail on the head, John, with your first thought, I think, because you said this, whatever you called it, this working group, this alliance between the Big Ten and the SEC that was announced, a year and a half ago. I mean, how fickle it seems to be in practice. These two conferences were supposed to work together and solve some big issues. They're not working together. They're fighting as much as they ever have. And even Curt Cignetti at little old Indiana's getting in the mix, fighting with anybody that'll have him across enemy lines. It's good offseason theater, I guess, but it sure doesn't send the message that the SEC and Big Ten are in lockstep, even though that's sort of what they announced they would be 18 months ago. That didn't really come to fruition any more than the Big Ten's alliance with the ACC and the Pac-12. Well, the artist formerly known as the Pac-12. That one didn't come to fruition either. So Big Ten doesn't have really a history of these alliances going very far.
I'm glad you brought that up. That old Pac-12, may it rest in peace.
Yeah. All right, let's get on to some week one games, John. You had a column recently in our SEC Unfiltered newsletter, which folks can subscribe to get emailed each and every day throughout the week to their inbox, free of charge. What a great offer that is. Hearing more from John Adams, free of charge. So your Monday newsletter, John, in SEC Unfiltered, You were ranking the week 1 games first to worst throughout the SEC, and it starts at the top. Not surprisingly, Texas at Ohio State, the big Arch Manning lid lifter in some ways. I mean, we've seen Arch before, but this is really the hard open for Arch. Last year was like the soft open. This year's the real opener. You got customers coming in. You're handing out the menus. Your chef's back in the kitchen. This is the real opener. Texas at Ohio State. So you got that at number 1. You have Ohio State, or excuse me, at number 2 you have LSU at Clemson. Makes a lot of sense. We're going to learn about each team's potential for the playoffs, national championships, hopes for all that for LSU Clemson in week 1. Big game for Brian Kelly. But I was interested, and I want to discuss this one. Number 3 on your list, because this one's kind of flying below the radar, I feel like. Alabama at Florida State. I mean, if you want to just talk about brands, this one's huge. Alabama at Florida State. But as bad as Florida State was last season, it feels like it has slipped below the surface somewhat. But you got it here at number 3, and it is a big game. I feel like we're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn, is Florida State going to be a joke again this year, or has their latest transfer haul maybe figured some things out? But more importantly, I think Alabama, what does new starting quarterback Ty Simpson look like? He's been in the program for a long time, seen so little of him. So kind of elaborate on your thought process here, getting Alabama at Florida State here, the number 3 spot on this list.
Well, first with Florida State, I don't think there's ever been a program that I can think of off the top of my head that has fallen as far as Florida State has so quickly, except when SMU got the death penalty.
Yeah.
Florida State didn't get the death penalty, but its program, it goes from almost right there on the cusp of playing for a national championship, and its quarterback goes down. It's one of the most impactful injuries in college football history. And so he goes down, and so Florida State doesn't even make the playoff. Players head for the NFL, transfer portal. Next thing you know, you've got a 2-10 program on your hand. I don't think there's any way Florida State will be 2-10 this year. I think it'll be much better because it has a history of recruiting pretty well, and I think it's paying okay in NIL. So the work in the transfer portal, I think, will pay off. And that game is in Tallahassee. And I really believe it matters so much to teams playing against an SEC team in a non-conference game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that really revs up a team because the SEC, as you talked about earlier, the SEC and Big Ten have sort of separated themselves from everybody else. And then there's that SEC history, and you got the Florida State-Florida rivalry. You know how much that would mean to Florida State to beat an SEC team. I think it will be highly motivated playing at home. And we just don't know about Alabama. I think its defense should be really solid. But Ryan Williams is a terrific wide receiver. But there are just questions about Alabama, the most notable of which you mentioned with quarterback Ty Simpson. I think anytime you have a quarterback who stuck around with the program now, this is an era where you don't stick around. First chance you get, you're out of there and you're going somewhere else where you're going to play more, make more money, whatever. Ty Simpson is stayed at Alabama as a backup. So rather than give him credit for that, I think most people look at him, well, he wasn't good enough to win the job.
Mm-hmm.
And he stuck around. So was he not good enough to go somewhere else and start? You don't know, but it raises questions. So I think there's so many questions about Ty Simpson. If you want to be optimistic about it as an Alabama fan, you think, well, maybe he fits the offense better than Jalen Milroe did. Maybe he fits Kalen DeBoer's offense, which is pass pocket oriented. Jalen Milroe, tremendous athlete, but that's not Kalen DeBoer's prototypical quarterback. So that's the reason to be optimistic. But I just think there are a lot of questions about it. And I think that's going to be a very hostile environment for Alabama to go into for a season opener.
I do too. With Florida State, it's interesting because, like a lot of fan bases, when Florida State fans realize they have a stinker on their hands, they'll just stop showing up. So you get late in the season when the team
Yeah.
stinks, there's nobody there. It's a friends and family crowd. But early in the season,
Mhm.
week 1 against Alabama, completely agree with you. That will be a hostile environment. Florida State brought in the number 2 ranked transfer class in the ACC, just looking at within their own conference. Their transfer haul is ranked 2nd in the conference by 24/7 Sports. They got a new quarterback, Tommy Castellanos from Boston College. He made some interesting offseason comments, basically acting like he's going to rumble right over Alabama. Doesn't see them as much issue now that Nick Saban's not around anymore. But a big transfer class. Squirrel White, the former wide receiver at Tennessee, is now at Florida State. A lot of names in there, guys that were at other pretty good programs, and so this is what Mike Norvell does. And a couple years ago paid off. Last year, his transfer class went bust. His quarterback selection of DJU, that went bust, and so kind of hitting the reset button here. But it is a very telling game. So I thought, that was rightfully number 3 on your list. Just looking at a couple more of these before we get into our round of fact or fiction. You have Auburn at Baylor at number 4. We were talking about that big game a couple weeks ago and how telling I think that's going to be for Auburn's season and Hugh Freeze. If they come out and look good and get a win at Baylor in week 1, I think that calms the waters on the Plains a little bit. If they lose at Baylor in week 1, boy, the heat around Hugh Freeze is gonna crank up to a boil. I think at that point. And then you got at number 5, Virginia Tech, South Carolina, and then number 6, Tennessee at Syracuse, and it really falls off after that. I mean, number 7 on your list is Toledo at Kentucky. Toledo, generally one of the better teams from the MAC, but the fact that at number 7 on the list, we're already getting away from Power 4 opponents in these non-conference games. So I touched on your 4 through 6 there, John. Any of those stand out to you? And also just your general thoughts about this week 1 slate in the SEC. I guess my thought would be really strong at the top. Those 1 through 3 games I think are very, very interesting. And then I feel like it tapers off pretty quickly. It's not exactly a week 1 feast, but it does. The main course, I guess I would say, it looks like it's pretty tasty. Maybe leave something to be desired there in some of the other courses.
Yes, I am curious about below those really significant games. I mean, I think the 2 top games in college football for the opening week are LSU at Clemson and Texas at Ohio State. But as you mentioned, I think the Baylor-Auburn game is very significant. And I'm also curious about a South Carolina-Virginia Tech game. Virginia Tech is not an ACC powerhouse. However, I'm not sure how good South Carolina will be. That game could tell us something, I believe. I think South Carolina will be favored. It is favored, but that won't be a cakewalk. And all these other games, though, I mean, the drop-off is so substantial. And I guess I'm not as educated in college football as I thought. I didn't realize Long Island University had a football team, but Florida, through probably exhaustive research, found it. Hey, circle it. They play football there. Okay. Well, let's let them play football in Gainesville, Florida. See how they like it. I mean,
that's quite a trip for Long Island University, traveling down to Gainesville, play a season opener. Hope the money's good. I bet it is.
Yeah, and there is one. Although the disparity between the 2 programs is gargantuan, there is a connection in that you know about sharks in Florida.
Yeah,
Long Island's a shark, so shark alert. Yeah,
I wouldn't have guessed Long Island's mascot's the Sharks. That's
It's
It's interesting.
it may be
I mean, it is an
wrong.
island, but I don't think sharks when I think of Long Island. Maybe
Well,
sharks of business or something. I don't know.
I could be wrong on that because I was looking. It's had three mascots. It started out as the Blackbirds.
Huh. Kind of like a
Yeah,
minor league baseball team. Just whenever they need to sell some new T-shirts, change the mascots. Is that what you're telling me?
yeah. Could they be the Bananas? Maybe.
Maybe, maybe yeah. The Savannah Bananas, the Long Island Bananas.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you can sign up for that SEC Unfiltered newsletter. I got it linked in the podcast description, so that way, next excellent newsletter offering John writes, you'll get that in your inbox. You won't have to wait to hear us discuss it here on the pod. But let's get to some fact or fiction, John. Tried to come up with some storylines that I thought might help define this SEC season, and you're gonna separate what's reality here from fantasy. So let's start at no other place than Arch Manning, because why not, right? Arch Manning is not going to be just one of the biggest stories in the SEC this season. It'll be one of the biggest stories in all of college football. He's got that opener at Ohio State. Ohio State, by the way, transitioning to a new quarterback of its own, likely hasn't been named yet, their starter, but probably going to be former 5-star recruit Julian Sayin, who initially was pledged to Alabama until Nick Saban retired, then rerouted toward Ohio State. So all the focus nationally seems to be on Arch, but interesting that Ohio State is going with its own highly touted recruit and a new starter there. But getting back to Arch, John, fact or fiction, Arch Manning will win the Heisman Trophy this season.
In Heisman Trophy balloting, I'll always take the field. So I'll say fiction. I expect Arch Manning to have a great year, but Heisman just doesn't favor the Manning family.
Good point.
Yeah, some defensive back from Michigan might win it over over Arch. So I'll
Tennessee
say
fans listening to this, John, you just brought that was a terrible flashback for them. Just probably triggered them. They'd be cowering in the corner after hearing that comment.
Well, you know what? I mean, I've been around this game so long. I covered Archie when he was with the Saints, but I remember him very well as a college player. I really thought he should have won the Heisman. He played there for 3 years and couldn't play as a freshman, of course, then, but just a tremendous player and did so much to lift Ole Miss's team. It wasn't a super team, but he made it capable of beating anyone on a given day. So, yeah, and then of course Peyton. I thought he should have won the Heisman, didn't. So there's just not a good track record with the Mannings, unless you want to look at it from another perspective and say, well, the law of averages are one Manning's going to win a Heisman at some point.
John, you and I both have Heisman ballots now. I'm curious, though, did you have a ballot in the controversial year with Peyton in '97, and what did your ballot look like? I know I'm asking you to reflect on some 28 years ago history now, but
yeah,
did you have a ballot at that time? Do you recall how you voted that year?
Yeah, I voted Peyton number one. I
Okay.
mean, I just thought he was the guy, and I didn't have Charles Woodson on my ballot.
Really?
My top three. No, I just kind of didn't buy that narrative that ESPN was selling really, really hard. He was like a three-way player, punt returner, wide receiver. He played token reps at wide receiver. He was a great cornerback, but no, I didn't. I had
there was Ryan Leaf that year.
I
Randy
had
Moss.
I had Ryan Leaf second. I thought
Ricky Williams that year rushed for almost 2,000 yards.
Yeah, those were my three guys.
You had Manning, Ryan Leaf, and Ricky Williams. Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, you passed my history test there. It's good memory, John. All right, so you've left Arch Manning out there more philosophically from the stance of if you're offered one player of the field in the Heisman race, you're taking the field. I think that's I think that makes sense to me as well. Do I like anyone more than I like Arch to win the Heisman? Not necessarily. I think he's a deserving front runner. I think it could be interesting. How good is Julian Sayin at Ohio State? I don't think he's going to win, but I wonder about the wide receiver there, Jeremiah Smith. I know it normally goes to a quarterback. We know that history, but Jeremiah Smith was so good as a freshman, over 1,300 yards receiving. Um, Depending on how good his quarterback is now, I think he could be in the mix along with other quarterbacks like Cade Klubnik at Clemson or Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. Or the thing about the Heisman is a guy could kind of come out of left field and put himself into contention. If I offered you Garrett Nussmeier, John, winning the Heisman, fact or fiction, does that change your answer? Are you still taking the field if I'm offering you Nussmeier?
Yeah, I would still take the field, and I would take the field against Cade Klubnik, who I think will have a really good year too.
Mm-hmm.
Thing about Nussmeier, uh, he's got so much talent around him now. LSU assembled an elite wide receiver core with 4 really good receivers, 2 of them via the transfer portal. Garrett Nussmeier is going to if he stays healthy, should have huge stats.
Yeah, I agree. If the question I'd posed was make it to New York as a finalist, I think I would have said fact on both Arch Manning and Garrett Nussmeier. Two quarterbacks from the same conference, that can happen. We've seen it before, so I would say fact on that. But I do agree with you when trying to pick a Heisman winner in August. I almost think that might be more difficult than trying to pick a national champion in August in some years. And so I think I will take the field. I will say fiction again on Garrett Nussmeier, although I would predict both he and Manning would be Heisman finalists.
Would you, if you could have Nussmeier and Arch Manning?
Then I would take it. You give them both to me against the field. I'd take the duo against the field. How about you? Still taking the field or no?
No, I would take that.
Yeah,
I would take
yeah. If we could package them together,
Yeah.
that's a good prompt. That should have been my prompt, John. I'm gonna let you run the podcast next time.
Okay.
All right, we'll leave the Heisman behind for our next prompt here. So last season, John, the Big Ten, as we know, led the way with 4 playoff bids. The SEC had a disappointing haul. That's the way the conference feels. You have detected that in their offseason messaging. They're trying to drum up more support for their strength of schedule. I think it's a little bit less about strength of schedule because I do think the committee generally honors strength of schedule. And I think it's more about don't have your playoff teams lose to 6-6 teams late in the season. Alabama losing to Oklahoma, Alabama losing earlier in the season to Vanderbilt. Florida finished better than 6-6, but Ole Miss blew it by losing late in the season to Florida. So I think it's more about that than strength of schedule. But disappointing first year for the SEC in the 12-team playoff. Still at 12 teams this year. The seeding's different, but the format's largely the same. So fact or fiction, the SEC will move up from 3 playoff bids to 4 playoff bids. Fact or fiction, the SEC will get 4 playoff bids this year.
I want to compliment you on that question because it's really hard to answer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really torn there. I'll say fact, it will move up to 4. Maybe one of those 9-3 teams that didn't make it last year will slip in this time. However, when I look at the league and I team by team, I go back to it's very similar, I think, to last year. There's some teams like Tennessee and Missouri that if I'm doing a power ranking, I wouldn't have them that high. They'd be in the middle of the league. But I look at that schedule and see a path to a playoff because of the schedule is so favorable. Mm-hmm. If those teams exceeded my expectations. And again, and I also look, the best teams in this league, I think, are LSU, Texas, and Georgia. And I really I think to me, talent-wise, LSU and Texas stand out. I put Georgia in there because of Kirby Smart. But Georgia has a tough schedule, and I look at some of these in Alabama. Again, questions at quarterback for both Georgia and Alabama. I just think it's really hard to tell. We could end up at the end of this season talking about the SEC in the same vein we talked about them at the end of the 2024 season, about teams missing their opportunity and falling just short.
John, the committee, as we know, it's not a stagnant group. It's not bound by its previous decisions. I wonder, do you think so the committee put in SMU and Indiana as its last two teams in. Alabama was the first team out, followed by Miami. Ole Miss and South Carolina were also in that mix. Alabama and South Carolina then went on to lose their bowl games for whatever that's worth. Ole Miss won their bowl game. Indiana lost its first-round playoff game. SMU got creamed in the playoff. SMU is a team I didn't think should be in the playoff, but we don't have to go back down that road. But I'm wondering, do you think what happened last year and all the controversy that surrounded those selections, and now then this offseason, propaganda campaign by the SEC, do you think that will wield any influence on the committee if it comes down to another one of these scenarios this year where it's like, let's say a team like SMU, a 2-loss team from either the ACC or Big 12, didn't win the conference championship, so they didn't get an auto bid. Maybe they're the conference runner-up, or maybe they're just a 2-loss team, versus a 3-loss team from the SEC. Do you think it could go differently this year, or do you think once again the committee would take the 2-loss team from either the ACC or the Big 12 versus the 3-loss team from the SEC? And I know it's hard to answer that without seeing the full resumes.
Yeah, but I do think anybody on that selection committee would say, of course, that won't be a factor. This is a new season, different scenario. Don't even suggest that we would be impacted by all the criticism we received last year. That's what they'll say. But yes, they will be affected. And
I think so too. Yeah, the fact that if SMU would have just lost,
sure.
and there's all this controversy around Indiana, as you know, John. I didn't have the issue with Indiana, and we don't have to relitigate this, but Indiana was 11-1. I didn't think there were better alternatives to them. And also, the game against Notre Dame in the playoff, I mean, it wasn't a nail-biter, but I didn't think Indiana just absolutely got creamed either. SMU, on the other hand, I mean, they got blasted by Penn State. That game was a laugher. So SMU didn't have to win, but the fact that they looked completely out of their element, even being in the college football playoff. I do think, like you said, they would never admit that influences them in the future, but they think, do we want to put another last team in that loses by 4 touchdowns in the first round of the playoff? We know Alabama or Ole Miss probably wouldn't have lost by 4 touchdowns. Maybe they would have. I don't know. But the committee's not going to think that. They're going to think they would have been more competitive games. And you do wonder if that kind of lodges in the mind a little bit.
Yeah, the defeat was just so overwhelming. And the strength, supposedly one of the strengths of SMU was its quarterback, Kevin Jennings, who couldn't throw the ball to the right team.
Yeah, he couldn't do anything.
No, he just looked like, why is he even in college? He's on scholarship, NIL deal. He shouldn't even have a scholarship. He's a much better player than he showed in that game. But just to look, the way that game started out, it kind of looked like TCU versus Georgia in a national championship game a while back. Yeah.
All right, fact or fiction, John? Texas will win the SEC championship. Texas is the front runner. The media picked them first in the conference predicted order of finish. Don't have our preseason polls out yet. Coming close. But there's a chance Texas could be preseason number 1. I think they'll be preseason number 1 or number 2. So they're the kind of the odds-on favorite here. Fact or fiction, they will win the SEC championship.
Fiction. Again, I'll take the field on that one. And let's face it, Texas last year couldn't beat Georgia playing its backup quarterback in the SEC championship game. I think
maybe Texas should have been playing its backup quarterback.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. Isn't it funny we look back on what Texas made the playoffs twice with Quinn Ewers at quarterback.
Not only made the playoffs, made the semifinals last year.
Yes. And now I think the take on that is, boy, if Texas would have played Arch Manning, I mean, it's like Quinn Ewers had a really good career.
Yeah, I think that's a little revisionist history, personally. I don't know that sticking. I mean, I saw Arch come into the game against Georgia the first time. That's what people forget. That Sark tried Arch Manning when Ewers was struggling in that regular season meeting, and Arch Manning didn't look good.
No.
At that point. Now, it wasn't all his fault. His offensive line decided they didn't want to block anybody that day. But, I remember how Arch looked that game. It wasn't great. So the idea that if he would have played Arch, all of a sudden Texas would have won the title last year, I think that's a little revisionist history. But that's what happens when you got a Manning sitting on the bench. I'm going to, for the first time here, disagree with you on this one. I will take Texas to win the SEC championship. I don't feel that with overwhelming conviction. I think there's a handful of other teams that could do it, whether it be your favorite LSU. I think LSU certainly has the talent to do it. Their schedule, I would say, is tougher than Texas. Georgia would be up there as well as another team that I think could do it. And Alabama, I just don't know. I'd feel a lot better handicapping Alabama's odds after week 1 once I see Ty Simpson against Florida State. But I will say fact, I'll take Texas as my favorite to win the SEC and go ahead and anoint them with a fact pick on this one. So our first disagreement. On to the next. We were ranking our hot seat list of coaches last week, John. So if you remember correctly, we had the same 5 coaches in our top 5 list. They were just in a different order. And so now I'm kind of setting a line here. Fact or fiction, at least 3 SEC coaches will be fired this season.
Fact.
Okay.
That's your easiest question so far.
Interesting. Well, then I'm going to surprise you, John. I think a couple of these guys that were on our list will survive. I'm going to say fiction and say it will be 2 SEC coaches fired. And I do think it will be 2 of the 5 from our list. I'm not going to be extra bold because that's not what the ask is here today. We're just doing fact or fiction. I'm not going to tell you which 2 it's going to be. Wouldn't be stunned if it's 3. Would you? Let me ask you this, John. If I asked at least 4 will be fired, would you have still said fact?
Yes.
Yes,
I think
that's
4 coaches will be fired.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, by the long pause, the pregnant pause, I don't think I can push it to 5. But you don't have to. I just set the number at 3, so you might be safely in the clubhouse there. So you say fact, at least 3 will be fired. You think it might be as many as 4? I say fiction. I think it's going to be 2 SEC coaches fired. All right, getting to the national championship race, the Big Ten now, 2-time winners of the crown back to back, had Michigan, had Ohio State. Now, many people like Penn State's chances to win the national championship. They also still have Ohio State in the mix. I would say they might have 2 of the top 3 favorites, John, depending on who you ask. Ohio State and Penn State might be 2 of the top 3, at the very least 2 of the top 4. So fact or fiction, the Big Ten will once again produce the national champion, which would make it 3 straight for the Big Ten. Fact or fiction?
Fiction. I agree with you. I think those are 2 of the leading contenders, Penn State and Ohio State. But Penn State just hasn't gotten it done when so much was riding on the outcome. And so it's hard to go against that history. And also, go back to last year, as good as Ohio State was. I think everybody thought in preseason Ohio State is the team, the most talented roster. We read and heard a lot about that. But it wasn't until the playoffs that Ohio State played like that team.
Mm-hmm.
The Michigan game seemed to galvanize it, but So to me, up until that point, despite its record until the playoffs, I thought Ohio State had underachieved when I look at his schedule. So I just don't think things will play out as well for Ohio State this time. I think it's really, really hard to win back-to-back national titles. And as talented as Penn State is, James Franklin's got to win a championship before I would predict him winning one.
Well, and the other thing is, I know James Franklin. He made the semifinals last year. He's been remarkably consistent at Penn State, but with Ryan Day, there was always the thing of like, oh, he can't win the big one. He can't win the big one. I thought that was I always thought that was an exaggeration with Ryan Day. And this isn't just because he's won the national title. I was saying this in the preseason last year. Like, he always beats James Franklin. I don't believe he's ever lost to James Franklin. Ryan Day struggles with one particular team, struggles with Michigan. Yeah, he lost in that epic game a few years back against Georgia in the college football playoff semifinals. Georgia goes on to win the national championship. But that game, I mean, that was a thriller. That was one of the games of the season. I don't put that on Ryan Day. That was just a thrilling game. Ohio State failed to protect the lead. Georgia rallied to win. Like, that to me that didn't give me concern over Ryan Day. And like I said, he just has an issue with one team. James Franklin, I think the narrative fits a little bit more. Can't win the big one. He's never beat Ohio State. He has his own problems with Michigan. They got to the semifinals last year, but they did it by beating SMU and Boise State. And then once you get up against the big brand, Notre Dame, they blew it against Notre Dame. So I feel like that narrative of can't win the big one is more fitting for James Franklin than it was even a year ago with Ryan Day. Ryan Day struggles with Michigan. Everybody else, he's always been fine against. And so it didn't really surprise me that he got across the finish line. It would be more surprising to me if James Franklin did.
I'm glad you brought up that Georgia-Ohio State semifinal game, which was one of the best playoff games I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And it could have gone either way. A kick goes one way and another one goes the opposite way. It's a different outcome. That was a great Georgia team, and it was a great Ohio State team.
That was a national championship game. It just happened to
Yes,
be
it
in the
was.
semifinals.
Yeah, I think that Ohio State team could have won a lot of championships. So I agree with you on Ryan Day. James Franklin, as we like to say, I think the world of him as a coach.
Oh, sure.
No, if you go back, he's still what he did at Vanderbilt is unprecedented. I can't just let that fade away and say, oh, yeah, and look solely at Penn State. This guy won at a place you just can't win, where nobody wins hardly, and he won there. So again, he's recruited well. I think he's a really good coach. But there are some glitches that pop up on game day in those crucial games. I mean, I think a lot of schools would like to have James Franklin as their coach.
As well they should. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to say fiction on this one as well, getting back to the prompt of the Big Ten producing another national champion. What's interesting is that doesn't necessarily mean the SEC will produce the champion. I'm just calling fiction on the Big Ten. Now, I don't think you got to draw the line somewhere, but I think not only by saying fiction, not only do you get the SEC, you also get Clemson, you get Notre Dame, and we both like Clemson. I think that's a big one to have in your pocket as well. So, this is kind of a close call here, but I'm going to say fiction with the knowledge that not only do I get all the SEC's front runners by saying fiction, I also got Clemson in my back pocket as well, which would prove this prompt to be fiction. So, I'm going to join you in saying fiction on this one. All right, I wanted to bring another team into the mix here, John. So I know what you think of LSU. You think highly of them. So I didn't set a prompt for them. You think they're going to be in the playoff because they're your front runner to win the conference championship. But I'm curious what you think, how much you're believing in Alabama with the uncertainty at quarterback. So here's one for you. Fact or fiction, Alabama will make the college football playoff?
Fiction.
Without hesitation.
No.
Fiction.
And not slamming Kalen DeBoer. I know if Alabama doesn't make the playoffs, Alabama fans will be in an uproar. But Kalen DeBoer needs to have his quarterback that fits his system. That's kind of a cop out. I realize that, but I can't ignore his track record. It's just unbelievable the percentage of games he's won. So I think he's a good coach, and I think he'll be successful at Alabama. But the quarterback thing, I can't get around that. I mean, I'll go back to the 23 season. Didn't Ty Simpson start that game against South Florida? Jalen Milroe got
No, that
benched. Was the other quarterback?
Ty Simpson played in that game. It was the Notre Dame transfer who wasn't very good that started in that game.
He was so not good that I've completely forgotten him.
Yeah, Simpson came in the second half and actually looked better than Tyler Buckner, the guy who started from Notre Dame. I mean, Simpson wasn't lighting the world on fire, but he came in the later in that game against South Florida. Completed a few passes. Neither one of them were great. Buckner was worse. But I think to your larger point, John, from what we've seen of Ty Simpson, in what little we've seen from Ty Simpson throughout his career, I mean, he hasn't looked like Arch Manning. You know, everybody says like Arch is unproven, but what we've seen from Arch in the limited sample size looks like a higher ceiling than what I've seen from Ty Simpson in the limited sample size.
Well, I've got another one for you. Based on a very, very little, very small body of work. Go back to last year when Austin Simmons had to play for Ole Miss, came in at quarterback against Georgia, and led Ole Miss right down the field for a touchdown. It was just a snapshot, very brief moment. But I looked at that game and I thought, man, this guy comes in against a great team and plays like that. I can't help but be swayed by that. I guess when you're evaluating players, quarterbacks in particular, you don't have to see a great performance over the course of a game, but you need to see something that makes you think the quarterback could be really, really good. It's not totally definitive, but I just didn't see that I've never seen that with Ty Simpson. Watching him play, not a lot, but watching him play some, nothing really stood out to me. He's like, he could be okay. But I just I can't ignore that question in trying to project how Alabama will do.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm going to maybe against logic say fact on this one. Alabama will make the playoff. That schedule, it's a bear. I mean, they're one of 3 SEC teams that will play 2 non-conference games against the big boys. Good for them, by the way. I think more teams should be doing this. They play Florida State in that opener, and then in week 3 they host Wisconsin. So they're playing a team from the ACC, playing a team from the Big Ten. Then you get in the conference schedule. I want to say that a lot of Alabama's toughest games are at home, which helps. They get Tennessee at home. They get LSU at home, Oklahoma at home. And even last year, Alabama lost 3 games, but they were undefeated at home, including beating Georgia. But I really can't say it's all their toughest games are at home, because then you look at their road slate. They're at Georgia. They're at South Carolina, which could be pretty good again. And then you got that week 1 game at Florida State. They're at Missouri, which I think could be a top 25 team. I mean, this is just a loaded schedule. We've talked a lot. And I forgot the Iron Bowl. Iron Bowl's on the road this year. So, we've talked a lot about how hard the schedules are for Oklahoma and Florida. I think Alabama's is right there, kind of knocking on the door for being in that mix. So I'm going to say fact, they make the playoff, John. When I look at that schedule and the quarterback situation, it's against logic. But I'm wondering if maybe Alabama becomes the first 3-loss team to make the college football playoff. They were the last team out, or excuse me, the first team out last year, the one closest to getting in with 3 losses. I wonder this year, I think the schedule is even tougher this year than it was last year with the fact they're playing an extra Power 4 non-conference game, something most of their SEC peers aren't doing. If they beat Florida State, beat Wisconsin, and go 5-3 in the SEC, would that be enough at 9-3? I don't know. I might be off in the weeds here, but I'm going to say fact that they get in the playoffs somehow, some way, even if that is with a 3-loss record.
Alabama fans will love your take.
I mean, if you had to pick a 3-loss team to be the first to make the college football playoff, wouldn't you take Alabama pretty high? I mean, back in the Nick Saban days, I would have said, well, they're not going to lose 3 games, so there'd be a terrible choice to be the first 3-loss team to make the playoff. But now, I think if I was drafting who would be the first 3-loss team to make it, I'd say it'd be Alabama.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, a couple more prompts, John, before we're out the door to get a couple more teams in the mix. This one I wanted to put 2 rivals together in the same prompt who play each other. Tennessee plays at the Swamp this year, but I'm not asking you who's going to win that game in particular, but fact or fiction, Florida will win more games this season than Tennessee. Now, let me set the stage. Tennessee has the easier schedule, but Tennessee has to go to the Swamp, which has been a house of horrors for them, dating back several decades at this point. Tennessee lost quarterback Nico Iamaleava and brought in the guy who Nico Iamaleava replaced at UCLA. Joey Aguilar transferred into Tennessee, who is formerly at Appalachian State. Florida, we know, got that brutal schedule. DJ Lagway dealing with some injuries in the offseason. So there's the stage is set. Fact or fiction, Florida will win more games than rival Tennessee.
Fiction. Florida's schedule is just it's just impossible. And even though it finished strong last season, I'm still not a true believer in Billy Napier as a coach. He's one coach I don't think will make it to 2026. Tennessee, I don't think it will beat Florida in the Swamp, but Tennessee's schedule is just so cushy. I look at that non-conference slate. Syracuse lost so much offense. Unbelievable amount of offense it lost. Quarterback, receiver, running back. So I just see Tennessee can win 4 non-conference games and plays the 4 worst teams in the SEC in conference play. So to me, that's 8 wins. Now if Tennessee finishes 9-3, strength of schedule won't be enough.
No, they're not going to be the first 9-3 team to make the playoff.
No, they're not.
No. I agree with you to a T, John. Sometimes I wish we could disagree more on this podcast. Might be more interesting for our listeners, but we don't put on airs here. We say what we think. We have had a few disagreements, but I think you nailed it. I got to give you credit because, or at the very least, we're both fools thinking the same way. Because I think Tennessee's going to lose in the Swamp. I just can't pick Tennessee to win in the Swamp. I just can't do it. I mean, I've seen too many times where Tennessee's gone in there and turtled up. Even in years where I thought Tennessee had the better team, they go into the Swamp and no, they can't do it. So I think they're going to lose in the Swamp, but they'll finish with a better record overall than Florida, which was the prompt, because of that schedule. They got a much more forgiving schedule. So they'll lose at Florida, but somehow, still finish with a better record because they're going to beat all those weaklings that they drew on the schedule, because Josh Heupel has that high floor. He's established that throughout the course of his career. He might lose in the Swamp, but he's going to hold serve at Neyland Stadium. The Vols have been incredibly tough at home since he became the coach. They might stub their toe once to someone random on the road, but they're not losing to a bunch of teams that they should beat. Generally, they beat the teams that they should beat. They'll have a road stub of the toe, but it's a high floor with Josh Heupel in terms of record. So I think Tennessee will finish with a better record, but will lose in the Swamp. And that brings us to our final prompt, John. Diego Pavia. Boy, this guy, as much as Arch Manning is the story of the offseason, Diego Pavia is kind of the runner-up. I mean, he's just taken on all interviews there, saying outlandish things, puffing his chest out. I don't blame him, right? I mean, he's been granted his 27th season of college football or whatever it is now. I mean, enjoy your victory lap, sir. You've earned it. Made Vanderbilt more entertaining than they've been really since the James Franklin era. I'm not going to say something outlandish like Pavia might if we had him on this podcast. I want to keep things among the land of the reasonable. So Vanderbilt not only went to a bowl game last year, won their bowl game, finished with 7 victories. Fact or fiction, Vanderbilt will get back to a bowl game this season.
Fiction. Just don't see that happening. Too much track record there that's contradictory. And I do like him as a quarterback. I think he's such a fiery guy. For all his comments, he backs it up a lot of times, and that Alabama upset was one of the most memorable in SEC. I guess he's also what you would call a dual threat interviewee. He could thank God and drop an F-bomb in the same interview. But Vanderbilt has a lot of returning players. I think teams will be more aware of Vanderbilt this year. I think they will know, we can't get by with our D game against Vanderbilt. We better consider it a legitimate threat. I just don't see Vanderbilt having a winning season.
Yeah, that's a fair point, John. I'm risking my reputation here with Vanderbilt, which puts me in a precarious situation, I realize. But I'm going to say they get back to that 6-6 mark and just slip in, make a bowl game at 6-6. So I will take the other way on this one and say fact, and that brings us to our that completes our fact or fiction prompts. We'll try to get to more teams as the final weeks of the preseason progress here. Got preseason polls coming out later in August, including the USA Today, USLBM coaches poll. We'll be back to discuss that later this preseason. And if you want to sign up for that SEC Unfiltered newsletter, it's free. You can get more takes from John and I in your inbox. Got that linked in the podcast description. As always, if you like what you hear on the pod, we'd appreciate it. You can hit the subscribe button or give us a rating or review. Those ratings and reviews help us find more listeners. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.